Catherine's husband and son thought they had committed the perfect crime. They swapped her heart medication for poison, but they didn't know. Catherine had a hidden camera in the kitchen. She faked her death, arranged her own funeral, and lay in the open casket, waiting for the moment they confessed to the guests. Hello ladies, Mary here. Trust is a funny thing. It takes a lifetime to build brick by brick, year by year. But it only takes 1 second to tear it all down. 1 second, one look, or in Catherine's case, one video clip on a smartphone. We always think we are safe in our own homes. We think the people we cook for and clean for are our protectors. But sometimes the danger isn't lurking in the alleyway. Sometimes the danger is standing in your kitchen, wearing your husband's face. Tonight's story is about a woman who refused to be a victim. She didn't just get mad. She got even. And she did it from the grave. My name is Catherine and I have been married for 40 years. You think you know a man after 40 years. You think you know the sound of his breathing and the way he stirs his coffee. But you don't know him. Not really. Not until you watch him trying to kill you on a grainy black and white screen on your iPad. It started with a missing diamond tennis bracelet. That was why I installed the hidden cameras in the kitchen and the study. I thought the new housekeeper was stealing. I was wrong. The housekeeper was innocent. The thief was sleeping in my bed. It was Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. I was supposed to be at the garden club, but I had come back early because I had a migraine. I was sitting in my car in the garage, simply waiting for the pain to pass before going inside. I opened the security app on my phone just to check if the house was quiet. And there they were. My husband Richard and my son Lucas, standing at the kitchen island. Richard was holding my weekly pill organizer, the blue plastic box that kept my heart rhythm steady. He wasn't filling it. He was emptying it. I watched in silence as he tipped my medication into the sink and turned on the garbage disposal. The sound of the grinding blades vibrated through the phone speaker. Then he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small orange bottle. He started placing new pills into the slots. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they looked exactly like my heart medication. White, round, small. But they weren't my medication. Are you sure this will work, Dad? Lucas asked. He was leaning against the counter, eating an apple. He looked bored. The doctor said her heart is weak, Lucas, Richard answered. If she takes these, it will induce a massive arrhythmia. It will look like natural causes. No autopsy. No questions. Richard closed the lid of the pill box with a snap. And the insurance, Lucas asked. 2 million. Plus the house. Plus the portfolio. We will be debt-free by the weekend. I sat in my car in the dark garage. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. They weren't just stealing from me. They were erasing me. They were discussing my death with the same casual tone they used to discuss the weather. I felt a scream rising in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I bit my lip until I tasted copper. I could not scream. If I screamed, they would know I was there. If they knew I was there, they wouldn't wait for the pills. They would finish the job right then and there. I was 65 years old. I was not physically strong, but I had something they didn't have. I knew. Knowledge is a weapon, and I was about to load it. I picked up my phone. I recorded the live feed for 2 minutes until they left the kitchen. Then I saved the video. I sent it to the cloud. I sent it to my lawyer. And then I called the only man I could trust. Detective Miller. Miller answered on the first ring. He was a private investigator I had hired 6 months ago. When I noticed money disappearing from our joint accounts, I thought Richard had a gambling problem. I didn't know the gambling problem was me. Miller, I whispered, you were right about everything. Catherine, where are you? He asked. His voice was sharp and alert. I am in the garage, they are inside. They swapped my pills, Miller. They are going to kill me. Stay in the car, Catherine, do not go inside, I am coming. No, I said, my voice was suddenly steady. If you come now, they will just deny it. They will say it was a mix-up. They will say I am confused. I need them to believe they succeeded. What do you mean? Miller asked. I looked at the screen again. Richard was laughing. He was pouring himself a glass of whiskey, celebrating my murder before I was even dead. I want to die, Miller, I said. I want to die so I can watch them bury me. Miller was silent on the other end of the line for a long 10 seconds. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the traffic in the background. He knew I was right, but he was terrified for me. Catherine, he said finally, this is extremely dangerous. If they realize you are faking it, they will not call an ambulance. They will use a pillow. They will finish the job manually. I know, I said, that is why you have to be ready. I need a medical team, Miller. Not real paramedics. Your people. I need a death certificate. I need a funeral home that asks no questions. Can you do it? Miller sighed. I know a guy who runs a private ambulance service for film sets. They have the uniforms and the gear. I can have a team parked down the street tomorrow morning. But Catherine, you have to be precise. If you mess up the timing, you are dead. I will not mess up, I said. I hung up the phone. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. I looked pale, which was perfect. I took a deep breath. I opened the car door and stepped onto the concrete floor of the garage. I was walking into the lion's den. I opened the door to the kitchen. The air smelled of coffee and betrayal. Richard and Lucas jumped when I walked in. They looked like two schoolboys, caught smoking behind the gym. Richard quickly put his hand over the pill organizer on the counter. Catherine, he said, his voice pitched a little too high, you are back early. The migraine was blinding, I said, rubbing my temples. I could not stay at the club. I need to lie down. Richard relaxed visibly. He rushed to the refrigerator. Let me get you some water, darling. He poured a glass. He handed it to me. His hand brushed mine. It felt cold and clammy. Thank you, Richard, the first said. I took a sip. I looked at Lucas. He was refusing to meet my eyes. He was staring at his shoes, my son. The boy I nursed through chickenpox. The boy I bought a car for when he graduated. He was standing there waiting for me to die so he could buy a better car. Did you take your medicine? Lucas asked, mumbling. Not yet, I said. I will take it in the morning. I just want to sleep now. I walked past them. I felt their eyes on my back. They were watching me, like vultures on a telephone wire. That night was the longest night of my life. I lay in bed next to Richard. I listened to the rhythm of his breathing. In and out, he slept soundly. How does a man sleep soundly when he knows he is going to murder his wife in the morning? I stared at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark. I replayed our life together. The vacations in Martha's Vineyard. The Christmas parties, the quiet Sunday mornings. Was any of it real? Or was I just a bank account with a pulse to him? I realized then that the grief I felt wasn't for my life. It was for the illusion I had lived in. The man next to me was a stranger. A monster wearing a husband's skin. At 3 a.m, I got up and went to the bathroom. I texted Miller. Target time is 9 o'clock. Be ready, he replied instantly. We are set. Good luck. I went back to bed, but I did not sleep. Morning came with a gray, flat light. The alarm buzzed at 7. Richard woke up stretching. Good morning, Catherine, he said. How is the head? Better, I lied. But my chest feels a little tight. Probably just stress. Richard sat up. He looked concerned. A perfect performance. You should take your medicine right away, he said. Do not skip a dose, I will get it for you. No, I said, sitting up, I will get it, I want to make toast. We walked to the kitchen together. Lucas was already there sitting at the island, scrolling on his phone. He looked up. He looked nervous. Good morning, Mom. Morning, Lucas. I walked to the counter. The blue plastic box was waiting. Wednesday, the white pill sat there looking innocent, looking like salvation. I knew it was poison. I poured a glass of water. My hands were trembling. I didn't have to fake that. I was terrified. Richard stood by the coffee machine watching me. Lucas stopped scrolling. The room went silent. I opened the little plastic lid. I tipped the white pill into my hand. I looked at it. This was the moment. I raised the glass. I put the hand with the pill to my mouth. But I didn't throw it back. I let the pill slide into the sleeve of my robe. It was a trick I had seen in a movie once. I hoped it worked. I swallowed a mouthful of water. I gulped loudly. I said, putting the glass down, "That is better." Richard let out a breath he had been holding. He smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has won. I counted to 10 in my head. 1, 2, 3. I let my left arm drop. 4, 5. I let my eyelids flutter. 6, 7. I gasped. Richard the first said, my voice choking. Richard. I grabbed the edge of the granite counter. I let my legs buckle. I collapsed to the floor, hitting my hip hard on the tile. The pain was real, but the rest was theater. Mom, Lucas yelled. He sounded panicked. Good. Richard was over me in a second. Catherine, can you hear me? He shook my shoulders. I let my head roll back. I let my eyes lose focus. I saw his face hovering over mine. He wasn't checking my pulse to save me. He was checking to see if I was gone. Call 911, Lucas, Richard shouted. But do not hurry. We arrived at the motel 20 minutes later. It was nondescript, the kind of place where people went to disappear. Miller had rented 2 adjoining rooms. One was my cell. The other was the tech room. Miller set up the iPad on a small wobbly table. He connected it to the hidden cameras back at the house. Are you sure you want to see this? Miller asked gently. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Turn it on, I said. My voice was hard. I was done being the victim. I was the jury now. The screen flickered to life. The kitchen. Richard and Lucas were still there. They hadn't rushed to the hospital. They hadn't even grabbed their keys. Richard was leaning against the counter, holding his chest, taking deep, exaggerated breaths. My God, Richard said, that was intense. Do you think she's dead? Lucas asked. He was pacing back and forth, chewing on his thumbnail. The paramedic said no response. She has to be, Richard said. He walked over to the cabinet, the liquor cabinet. He pulled out the bottle of Macallan 18, the bottle I bought him for our 30th anniversary. With that dose, her heart would have exploded before they got to the end of the street. He poured 2 glasses, neat. Here, Richard said, shoving a glass into Lucas's hand. Drink, it calms the nerves. Lucas took the glass. Dad, what if they do an autopsy? What if they find the pills? They won't, Richard said confidently. I told you. She has a documented history of arrhythmia. It will be ruled a tragic cardiac event. A widowmaker. He took a long sip of the scotch. He swirled the amber liquid, looking at it with satisfaction. Besides, Richard added, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Who is going to question a grieving husband? We're the victims here, Lucas. Remember that. We are the survivors. The survivors, Lucas repeated. He took a drink. So when do we call the insurance? Not yet, Richard scolded. Don't be greedy. We play the part, we go to the hospital, we cry, we scream at the doctors. We plan a funeral, a big one, the biggest this town has ever seen. Why a big funeral? Lucas asked. Doesn't that cost money? It's an investment, Richard said. We invite everyone, the partners, the investors. We show them how devastated we are. We solidify our position. And then in a month we quietly liquidate the assets. I watched them toast. They clinked my expensive crystal glasses together. Clink. The sound was tiny on the iPad speaker, but it hit me like a sledgehammer. To Catherine, Richard said, raising his glass to the empty kitchen, a devoted wife, a loving mother, and a very, very profitable tragedy. To Mom, Lucas mumbled and drank the whole glass in one gulp. I stared at the screen. I felt a coldness spreading through my veins. He wants a big funeral, I said quietly. Miller nodded. That's his play, The Grieving Widower. I stood up. I walked to the window. Fine, I said. He wants a big funeral? I'll give him one. But he's not going to be the only one giving a speech. I turned back to Miller. Call your contact at the funeral home, I ordered. Mr. Black. Miller hesitated. Black? He hates Richard. Exactly, I said. Richard tried to sue him last year over a zoning dispute. Mr. Black would do anything to see Richard humiliated. Call him. I need to arrange my own service. Miller raised an eyebrow. You're going to plan it? Oh yes, I said. I'm going to pick the flowers. I'm going to pick the music. And I'm going to pick the casket. An open casket, Catherine Miller warned. This is risky. You have to lay still for hours. Risky is trusting your husband, I said. This is justice. Get the phone, Miller. I have a funeral to plan. That night, the house was transformed. I watched from the motel room as caterers arrived. Richard hadn't wasted any time. He called it an impromptu wake, a gathering of friends to support the family. But looking at the spread, caviar, champagne, lobster tails, it looked more like a gala. The guests arrived at 7 p.m. People I had known for decades. Mrs. Gable from the garden club, the mayor, Richard's golf buddies. They walked in wearing black, hugging Richard, patting Lucas on the back. She was a saint, Richard told Mrs. Gable, dabbing his dry eyes with a handkerchief. My anchor. I don't know how I'll go on without her. You must be strong, Richard, Mrs. Gable said, tearing up. She would want you to be happy. I'll try, Richard whispered bravely. As soon as Mrs. Gable walked away, Richard turned to a man in a gray suit, his bookie. I recognized him from the surveillance photos Miller had taken. Don't worry about the debt, Rocco, Richard murmured, his voice low. The insurance pays out in 48 hours, $2 million. You'll get your cut plus interest. You better hope so, Richie, the bookie growled. Because if you don't, you'll be joining her in the ground. It's a done deal, Richard smirked. She's dead. The certificate is signed. It's just paperwork now. I watched Lucas in the corner. He was flirting with a young woman, the daughter of one of Richard's investors. He was wearing a Rolex, my father's Rolex. I had kept it in the safe for 20 years. He had already looted the safe. Yeah, it's tough, Lucas was saying, leaning against the wall, but you know life is short. My mom always said live for today, so I'm thinking of buying a boat. Maybe travel a bit. That sounds healing, the girl said, looking impressed by the watch. Healing, I scoffed at the screen. You little parasite. Miller walked into the motel room carrying a garment bag. Your dress, he said. I unzipped the bag. It was the dress I had worn to my son's graduation, a deep blue silk, elegant, commanding. Not a shroud. A statement. You ready for tomorrow, Miller asked. I'm ready, I said. But Miller, the audio. It's set up, Miller assured me. We wired the casket. There are speakers hidden under the floral arrangements. When you give the signal, the whole church will hear what we recorded in the kitchen. Good, I said. I looked back at the screen one last time. Richard was raising a glass of champagne. He was laughing at something the mayor said. He looked lighter, younger. He looked like a man who had just shed a heavy burden. He had no idea the burden was about to stand up and point a finger at him. I turned off the iPad. Get some sleep, Miller said. You have to play dead for 4 hours tomorrow. I can do it, I said. I've been playing the fool for 40 years. Playing dead will be easy. I lay down on the lumpy motel mattress. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow I would go to my own funeral. I would lie in a box while my husband lied to the world. But when the lid opened, when the lid opened, the truth was going to come out, and it was going to scream. I sat up slowly, the silk lining rustling like dry leaves. The church went dead silent, the kind of silence where you can hear a pin drop, or a heart break, or a man's soul leave his body. Catherine, Mrs. Gable whispered from the front row. She clutched her chest. Oh, my sweet Lord. It's a miracle. It's not a miracle, Martha, I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. It's a sting operation. I swung my legs over the side of the casket. My heels clicked on the marble floor. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my blue silk dress. Richard was backed against the altar, his face the color of old ash. He looked like a cornered rat. Catherine, he choked out. You were dead. I checked your pulse, you were dead. You checked what you wanted to find, Richard, I said, walking toward him. You were so eager to bury me. You didn't bother to make sure I was actually gone. I stopped 5 feet from him. You switched my pills, I said loudly, so the people in the back could hear. You tried to poison me, for what? To pay off your bookie? No, Richard screamed. That's a lie, she's delirious. The oxygen deprivation, she's confused. Am I asked. I pointed to the back of the church. The heavy oak doors swung open. Detective Miller walked in. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. And the paramedic who had picked me up, Steve, now wearing a suit and holding a very real evidence bag. Richard Vance, Miller said, his voice booming. Lucas Vance, Lucas, who had been trying to sneak out the side door, froze. An officer grabbed his arm. Let go of me, Lucas shouted. I didn't do anything, it was all him. It was Dad's idea. Shut up, you idiot, Richard roared. The apple doesn't fall far from the poison tree, I said coldly. Miller walked up the aisle. He stopped in front of Richard. We have the video from the kitchen, Miller said. We have the swapped pills from the trash. We have the audio of you celebrating her death. And we have the witness testimony of Mrs. Vance herself. Richard looked at the police. He looked at the crowd. He looked at me. The arrogance finally broke. He slumped. He looked small, old. Catherine, he whispered, please, I was desperate. The debt. They were going to kill me. So you decided to kill me instead, I asked. I didn't want to, he sobbed. I loved you. You loved my money, I corrected. And now you won't have either. I turned to the police. Get them out of my sight, I said. This is a funeral after all. We should bury the trash. The officers handcuffed Richard. He was weeping openly now, a pathetic broken sound. They dragged him down the aisle, past the people he had tried to impress. Lucas was next. He looked at me as he passed. Mom, please, I'm your son. You stopped being my son when you poured that whiskey, I said. Don't call me Mom. Call your lawyer. They were gone, the doors closed. I stood alone on the altar. The corpse had risen. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces. Mrs. Gable was fanning herself. The mayor looked like he had swallowed a lemon. I apologize for the theatrics, I said to the crowd. But as my husband said, I wanted my friends to have a chance to say goodbye. I walked over to the casket. I looked inside at the empty silk pillow. Goodbye, Catherine, the victim, I whispered. I closed the lid. Click. They say that in a medical emergency, every second counts. But Richard wasn't operating on a rescue timeline. He was operating on a Reaper's timeline. He didn't want the golden hour, he wanted the silence. Lying on that cold kitchen tile, Catherine learned exactly how long a minute can feel when your own husband is counting down to your expiration. But she also learned that having a good private investigator is better than having a guardian angel. I lay on the linoleum, my cheek pressed against the cold, hard squares. I held my breath. I had to be still. I had to be dead weight. Is she gone? Lucas whispered. His voice was trembling, but not with grief, with fear of getting caught. Check her pulse, Dad, Lucas hissed. I felt Richard's fingers on my neck. His skin was rough. He pressed against my carotid artery. I willed my heart to slow down. I tried to think of calm things, snow falling, a quiet library. But my heart was hammering against my ribs, like a trapped bird. Richard was so adrenaline-fueled, so panicked himself, that he mistook his own racing pulse for the absence of mine. Or maybe he just wanted me dead so badly that his brain filled in the blank. It's weak, Richard said, his voice flat. It's barely there. Give it a minute. They waited. I lay there, lungs burning, playing dead while they watched. Okay, Richard said finally. Make the call. Use the landline in the hallway, it looks better. Lucas ran to the hall. I heard the beep of the keys. 911. What Lucas didn't know, what Richard didn't know, was that Miller had been in the house 3 days ago to fix the internet. He had installed a redirect box on the VoIP line. When Lucas dialed 911 from that phone, it didn't go to the county dispatcher. It went to the van parked 3 houses down. Emergency services, a calm female voice answered on speakerphone. It was Miller's associate, Sarah. My mother, Lucas shouted, putting on a show. She just collapsed. I think it's a heart attack. We are at 450 Oak Creek Drive. We have units in the vicinity, Sarah said professionally. Dispatching now. It was seamless. Less than 60 seconds later, sirens wailed right outside the driveway. What the hell? Richard snapped, looking at the window. That was too fast. Maybe they were already in the neighborhood, Lucas stammered. The front door burst open. Heavy boots thundered down the hallway. Paramedics, we got a call, a deep voice boomed. 2 men in uniforms rushed into the kitchen. They looked real. They smelled like antiseptic and diesel. One of them, a large man with a red beard named Steve, knelt beside me. Ma'am, can you hear me? He shouted. He pinched my arm hard. The pain stimulus test? I didn't flinch. Pupils dilated. No response, Steve yelled. We need to load and go. Get the gurney. Richard stepped back, wiping his brow. Will she make it? He asked, putting on his concerned face. She has a bad heart. We tried to give her the pills, but she fell. We're doing everything we can, sir, Steve said. As he leaned over to check my airway, he whispered barely loud enough for me to hear. Stay down, Catherine. He placed an oxygen mask over my face to hide my breathing. They lifted me onto the gurney and strapped me in. Can we ride with her? Lucas asked, sounding like he hoped the answer was no. No room, Steve shouted, pushing the gurney toward the door. We have to work on her in transit. Meet us at St. Jude's. Move, move, move. They wheeled me out into the morning air. The sun was blinding. They shoved the gurney into the back of the ambulance. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed again, and we peeled out of the driveway. For a full minute, I stayed frozen, terrified that Richard might be following in his car. We're clear, Catherine, Miller's voice said from the driver's seat. I ripped the oxygen mask off. I sat up, gasping for air. Did they buy it? I asked, my voice shaking. Hook, line, and sinker, Steve said, grinning. Your husband didn't even try to do CPR. He just watched. I know, I whispered. I felt him waiting. Mrs. Vance, Steve said, holding out a biohazard bag. The pill, the one you put in your sleeve. I reached into the cuff of my robe. The small white pill, the poison was still there. I dropped it into the bag. That's the evidence, Miller called from the front. That's attempted murder right there. Good work. We weren't going to St. Jude's. Miller took a hard left, heading toward a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, where he had set up his command center. What now? I asked, rubbing my arm where Steve had pinched me. Miller looked in the rearview mirror. Now we let them dig their own grave. The adrenaline of the confrontation eventually fades. The police sirens grow distant. The shocked whispers of the neighbors die down, and then you are left with the silence. But this silence wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of a marriage gone wrong. It was the clean, crisp silence of a fresh start. Catherine had blown up her life to save it. Now she had to walk through the rubble and decide what to keep and what to leave behind. The days following the funeral that wasn't a funeral were a blur of legal pads and police statements. I spent more time in interrogation rooms, giving testimony than I did in my own bed. But I didn't mind. Every time I signed a statement, I felt a little lighter. I sat across from Miller in a diner 3 days after the arrest. He looked tired but satisfied. He was eating a cheeseburger, like it was the best meal on earth. So Miller said, wiping ketchup from his lip, the district attorney is throwing the book at them. Attempted murder. conspiracy, insurance fraud. And because they crossed state lines to buy the look-alike pills, they tacked on some federal charges too. Good, I said. I stirred my iced tea. And the debts? Miller grimaced. It is worse than we thought, Catherine. Richard didn't just owe Rocco. He owed everyone. He mortgaged the house 3 times. He drained your retirement accounts. He even took out credit cards in Lucas's name. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound, so Lucas was broke too. Lucas is singing like a canary, Miller said. He is trying to cut a deal. He says Richard forced him. He says he was a victim of emotional manipulation. He was a victim of his own laziness, I said. Let him sing, the judge won't care. I went back to the house one last time. It was a crime scene now, but the police let me in to get my personal effects. I walked through the kitchen. I looked at the spot on the floor where I had collapsed. I looked at the island where they had planned my murder. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a stage set for a horror movie. I packed one suitcase. I took my clothes. I took my mother's jewelry. I took the photo albums from when the boys were babies because even monsters were innocent once. And I wanted to remember the potential they had wasted. I left everything else. The furniture Richard picked out, the crystal glasses they toasted with, the expensive rugs. I called a realtor from the driveway. Sell it, I said. I don't care about the price. Just get rid of it. I want it gone. I drove away without looking back in the rearview mirror. There is a saying that you should never burn your bridges. I disagree. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge so you can't retreat. You have to force yourself to move forward into the unknown. I checked into a hotel. A nice one this time, not a motel with Miller. I ordered room service. I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, the sun was shining. I felt different. I felt lonely, yes. But I also felt safe. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't have to wonder what my husband was thinking. I knew exactly where he was. He was in a 6x8 cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed with his complexion. And me, I was alive. There is a specific kind of theater that happens when a wealthy person dies. It is not about grief, it is about branding. You have to look sad enough to be respectable, but not so sad that you forget to network. Richard was a master of this performance. He didn't waste a single tear that wasn't being watched by an audience. But he forgot that the director of this particular play wasn't God or fate. It was the woman he thought he had murdered. And I was about to give him some very difficult stage directions. We sat in the motel room, huddled around the speakerphone. Miller had called his contact at the funeral home, a man named Mr. Black, who owed Miller a life debt. Mr. Black was the one who called Richard to deliver the news. Mr. Vance, I am so sorry to tell you this. The deep voice rumbled through the speaker. Your wife passed away in the ambulance. Her heart simply gave out. We have received her remains at Blackwood Memorial, as per the instructions in her file. I watched Richard on the hidden camera feed. He was standing in our kitchen, holding the phone to his ear. He squeezed his eyes shut. He let out a ragged sob. Oh God, no. Catherine, my poor Catherine. He sounded devastated. He sounded broken. It was an award-winning performance. Thank you for telling me, he choked out. I will be there shortly to make the arrangements. He hung up the phone. The sob vanished instantly. He turned to Lucas and pumped his fist in the air. Yes, she is gone. It is done. Lucas let out a long breath. He slumped onto a stool. Are you sure, Dad? Are you sure she is dead? She is at the morgue, Lucas, Richard said, pouring another drink. Of course she is dead. Now go put on a tie. We have to go play the grieving family. We have to go pick out a casket. They left the house 20 minutes later. I watched them back the Mercedes out of the driveway. They were driving my car. Richard was already acting like the sole owner of the estate. Miller drove us to the funeral home through the back alleys. We entered through the service entrance. The air inside smelled of lilies and formaldehyde. It was cold. Mr. Black met us in the prep room. He was a tall man with skin like parchment paper. "Mrs. Vance," he said, bowing slightly, "it is an honor to help you with this unique request." "Is he here?" I asked. "He is in the showroom," Mr. Black said. "He is trying to buy the cheapest package we have. He asked for the cremation special, the one we usually reserve for indigents." My blood boiled. He wanted to burn me, not just to hide the evidence of the poison, but to save a few $1,000s. "You know what to do," I told Mr. Black. Mr. Black nodded. He adjusted his tie and walked out to the showroom. Miller and I watched. From behind a heavy velvet curtain, Richard was standing by a simple pine box. It looked like a crate used to ship oranges. "This is fine," Richard was saying. "Catherine was a simple woman. She would not want a fuss. Cremation is best. Ashes to ashes, you know." "Actually, Mr. Vance," Mr. Black said, smoothing his hands, "there is a complication. Your wife came in 3 months ago. She pre-planned her entire service, and she prepaid." Richard froze. "Prepaid?" "Yes," Mr. Black continued. "She selected the platinum service, the mahogany casket with the silk lining, the string quartet, and most importantly, she insisted on an open casket viewing. She wanted her friends to have a chance to say goodbye." Richard turned pale. "Open casket. But I think I would prefer to remember her as she was." "I am afraid it is a binding contract," Mr. Black lied smoothly. "If you deviate from her wishes, the estate attorneys are notified, and the probate process freezes. It could take years to access the funds." That was the magic word, funds. Richard needed the money now. He couldn't afford a freeze. "Fine," Richard snapped. "Do the open casket. Do the mahogany. Just get it over with." "When can we have the service?" "Tomorrow night," Mr. Black said. "We will rush the preparation. Tomorrow," Richard said. "Good, the sooner the better. I have business to attend to." He didn't mean business. He meant running away with the money. There is something unnaturally quiet about lying inside a casket. The silk is soft, but it smells like finality. You can hear the world muffled through the wood. The shuffling of feet, the murmurs of sympathy, the terrible screeching irony of a husband crying for a wife he killed. I lay there in the dark, breathing shallowly, clutching a small remote control in my folded hands. I wasn't just a corpse. I was a bomb waiting to detonate. The service began at 10 a.m. sharp. I had been placed in the casket an hour earlier by Mr. Black. He had applied makeup to make me look paler, more sunken. "Just relax," he had whispered. "And for God's sake, don't sneeze." The lid was closed for the arrival. I heard them come in. "Such a tragedy," a woman's voice whispered. "And so sudden." "Richard looks destroyed," a man replied. The organ music started. A mournful, heavy tune. I hated it. I had specifically requested Vivaldi, but Richard had probably changed it to something more tragic to sell the performance. Then the moment of truth. "Friends, family," the priest began. "We are gathered here to say goodbye to Catherine Vance. At the request of the family, the casket will now be opened for a final viewing." I felt the latches click. 1, 2. The heavy mahogany lid lifted. Light flooded in. I kept my eyes closed. I kept my chest still. I was a statue. I heard gasps. "She looks so peaceful," someone sobbed. "Too young," another murmured. Then I heard heavy footsteps approaching the dais. It was Richard. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and expensive scotch. He leaned over the casket. His breath hit my face. "Goodbye, Catherine," he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. "You were a good wife, but you were worth more dead." He placed a hand on my cold folded hands. He patted them. "I win," he hissed. He stood up and turned to the congregation. He cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," Richard said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. She was my light, my partner. We had 40 years. 40 years of love. I tightened my grip on the remote control hidden under my hands. She had a heart condition, Richard continued, lying through his teeth. We knew this day might come, but nothing prepares you for the silence, the empty chair at the table. He wiped a tear. I just hope, Richard said, looking up at the stained glass ceiling, that she knows how much I loved her, that I did everything I could to save her. That was the cue. Everything I could to save her. I pressed the button on the remote. The speakers hidden in the floral arrangements crackled to life. The sound was deafening in the quiet church. Are you sure this will work, Dad? Lucas's voice boomed through the sanctuary. The congregation froze. Richard's head snapped up. He looked around wildly. The doctor said her heart is weak, Lucas. If she takes these, it will induce a massive arrhythmia. It will look like natural causes, no autopsy. Richard's face went white. He looked at the casket. He looked at me. I opened my eyes. I didn't sit up. I didn't scream. I just opened my eyes and locked them onto his. Richard stumbled back. He tripped over the flower stand. He fell to the floor with a crash. She's, he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the casket. She's looking at me. The recording continued. And the insurance? $2 million. Plus the house. We will be debt-free by the weekend. The crowd began to murmur. The whispers turned into shouts. What is this? Mrs. Gable screamed. Richard, what is that recording? It's a fake, Richard yelled, scrambling to his feet. It's AI. Someone is hacking the system. Is it? I asked. I sat up. 6 months later. I sat on the patio of a small cottage on the coast of Maine. The air smelled of salt and pine, sharp and clean. It was a far cry from the manicured lawns and stifling social expectations of my old life. Here, nobody cared if my pearls were real or if my lawn was perfectly edged. They only cared if I waved back when I walked down the beach. My phone buzzed on the wicker table. Next to a glass of iced tea, it was Miller. Catherine, Miller said. His voice was lighter than I had ever heard it. The verdict is in. I took a sip of tea. My hand didn't shake. Tell me. Guilty on all counts, Miller said. Richard got 25 years. No parole for at least 15. At his age, that's a life sentence. And Lucas, I asked. 10 years, Miller replied. He cried when they read the sentence, blamed his father until the bailiff dragged him out. I looked out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks, relentless and enduring. Do you feel bad? Miller asked gently. No, I said. I feel like I just finished a very long, very bad book. And now I can finally start a new one. Well, Miller said, you wrote a hell of an ending. I certainly did. I smiled. Come visit sometime, Miller. The lobster rolls are excellent. I might just do that, he laughed. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the railing. I took a deep breath. My chest didn't hurt anymore. The funny thing about my heart condition, it turns out it was mostly stress. It was the stress of living with a lie. It was the stress of sleeping next to a man who looked at me and saw a dollar sign. Once the poison, Richard and Lucas, was removed from my life, my heart found its own rhythm again, strong, steady, unbroken. I wasn't Catherine the victim. I wasn't Catherine the widow. I was just Catherine. And for the first time in 65 years, that was enough. And there you have it, ladies. Catherine taught us a valuable lesson today. We spend so much of our lives trying to keep the peace, trying to hold families together, trying to be the glue. But sometimes the people we are holding on to are the ones dragging us down. Richard and Lucas thought Catherine was weak. They thought she was a simple woman with a bad heart. They forgot that the heart is the strongest muscle in the body. It pumps, it endures, and when it has to, it fights back. So here's my question for you tonight. Is there someone in your life who is underestimating you? Someone who mistakes your kindness for blindness? If so, maybe it's time to check the cameras, or at least check who is pouring your tea. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Catherine's shoes. Would you have called the police right away? Or would you have planned the funeral? I know which one I would choose. If you enjoyed watching Catherine rise from the dead to bury her enemies, please hit that like button and subscribe. This is Mary signing off. Stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, the best revenge is a life well lived and an ironclad will.